The game between David Baramidze and Caruana, played in round one of Dortmund. It was a very complex game in the Dutch, but White ended up losing a drawn endgame, so the game can create false impressions that White was utterly outplayed in every phase. I think that the game was more or less balanced most of the game, so let's take a look. So White plays the basic moves g3, bishop g2, knight f3, castle. Caruana plays the Leningrad with queen e8 and intending queen f7. Rook e1. So White intends a quick e4. Queen f7. And of course there are very sharp lines here with e4. But his opponent chose the more solid plan with b3. Knight e4 and queen c2. Queen c2 is a bit rare here. Actually, the main line is bishop b2. And one thing that's interesting about bishop b2 is that White would actually like to have his rook on f1 in this position, because then he could play knight takes e4 and then knight g5. But so you could consider this variation to be exploiting the fact that the rook is on e1. So in any case, queen c2 was played, which is not a bad move. Knight c6 and bishop e3. Bishop e3 looks a little bit strange to me. I would have figured that the main line probably would be something like bishop b2. And in this case, after knight takes, bishop takes, knight takes, bishop takes, White can play the interesting intermediate move, knight takes d6. And in this case, generally I would think White should have a very slight edge. Possibly queen f6, rook b1, and for example, queen takes b2. But Black should probably draw this endgame, for example, after trading queens and playing rook b8 and rook e8. Probably White doesn't have quite enough to try to press home a win. So, in any case, that would have been a safer try for White. Bishop e2. Yeah, the bishop does look quite strange on e3, and within a few moves, White actually could have come under pressure by f4 at some moment. Not yet, of course, but we'll see. So knight takes, pawn takes, e5. A standard counter, and now d5. Here I was thinking that, that f4 was an interesting possibility. And one of the ideas is that in some cases, knight d4 and bishop g4 can occur with some aggressive play for Black. So in this position, I looked at knight g5, queen e8, and bishop d2. And this position is really not so clear. So now there's, for example, bishop g4, and for example, I looked at bishop g4, f3, bishop f5, and it's not exactly clear what's going on in this position. Black, in some cases, for example, if queen d3, he can play c6, followed by queen f7, and there's some pressure on the d5 pawn. So f4 would have been a good try to complicate the game. In any case, knight b8 was played a little bit more passively than I would have liked to play, but nevertheless, not a bad move. Rook c1, h6, c5, knight a6. So Black builds a very solid position. His only real weakness, you could argue, is perhaps d6. And in view of that, I probably would have chosen knight d2 to try to play knight c4. And in this case, for example, after b6, knight c4, rook d8, rook e d1, perhaps White has a small advantage here. But it looked like the way the white played wasn't that convincing. He played h4. Yeah, after h4, perhaps the best would just be b6 and bishop b7. And it can actually be awkward to defend this pawn. For example, after knight c2, knight d2, and knight c4, there's rook a d8. And here black has no real bad pieces, so I think black has a good position. So, instead of b6, he chose bishop d7, also a solid move. Queen d2, king h7. Yeah, here it's difficult to suggest a real plan for white. One possibility is the move queen a5. And at least queen a5 makes it difficult to move the knight and to move the pieces. And also there's no b6, which is one of black's main ideas. Also, in some cases, white can play queen a3 and create some pressure on d6. For example, this is also a possibility. So I think that possibly queen a5 was a better move after king h7. So king h7, rook d1, b6, very solid. Knight e1, rook c8, knight d3. Yeah, white could have also put the knight on c2, for example, by trading here and playing knight c2. He could have played something like f3, bishop f2, e4, and possibly knight a3, and then coming here, at least trying to exploit the one weakness in black's position. So I probably would have preferred that plan. Knight d3, knight c5, good move. Knight b2 looks a little bit passive. Here it would have been interesting to continue with f4. I was kind of wondering what would happen in that case. Possibly bishop takes c5, b takes c5, knight c4, and queen e7. And in this case, bishop e4, threatening h5, h5. Here it's not really clear. I mean, it seems that black has a better position because, for example, e3, there's rook f6, and there's rook f8. And so it seems like black has a great position and pressure on the f-file. So, in view of that, seems that f4 was the correct move. He played queen e7, and yeah, b4 is a possibility. I probably would have chosen knight c4 anyway, and it's not that obvious what black's next move is. For example, if queen f6, then f4 is a possibility. So I'm not quite sure what he was intending after knight c4. So b4, knight a4. It was also possible to play knight a6 here. I was wondering about knight a6, rook takes, and rook c1. This could have been interesting. So, but well, we'll see if black had serious winning chances after knight a4. If not, then knight a6 was the better move. So knight a4, and so he trades and takes again and plays rook c1. So now he's pretty much heading for a very drawish endgame. And then queen c1, yes. So he plays queen takes and bishop takes. And generally speaking, you would think that this wouldn't be too difficult to draw. Because even if black tries to activate the bishop, let's say by e4, then there's bishop f4, bishop e5, and for example, takes, and then g4 and h5. And it seems like all the pawns, or a lot of pawns, are getting traded off. So I would think that white doesn't have any particular trouble drawing that. So it's quite impressive that black actually won this game. So bishop c2, f3, looks like a good move. King f2, king g7, e4. Yeah, that looks like the right plan. White doesn't really have any other pawn breaks to consider. f4, bishop h3, logical move. So white improves his bishop. Maybe he'll put it on d7 or e6. h5, bishop d7, good move. So now these pawns will probably make it impossible for black to really try to win this. G5, and in this position it looks like bishop e8 was definitely the move. And it seems to me that this just ends in a draw immediately. For example, if you take here and take here, then just king g2, and then I simply take the pawn because the bishop covers the h6 square. So as far as I can see, bishop e8 was just a very simple draw. But he played pawn takes, that looks fine. And then he played king g2, that also looks fine. King f6. Yeah, I think that this position was quite deceptive. I think that the position is drawn after g takes f4. So g takes, pawn takes, takes. It looks like the king has the e5 square, but I don't think he can actually use it. For example, let's say I just play the move a3. Then if you play king e5, then there's bishop e8. And suddenly the pawn becomes very weak. So I'm not really sure that black actually had any winning chances even in this endgame. So yeah, g4 was a bad move. That was the one that gave black all the chances here. So yeah, I'm not sure about this. In this position, I probably would have considered immediately trying to improve the bishop's position. Bishop e5, bishop d3 takes. Yeah, it was forced to give up the f3 pawn. Now at least black has a protected pass pawn and he has chances to keep improving his position. So b5, bishop h6, king h4. Looks like the white king is going to have to go back pretty soon. Bishop g2, g5. Yeah, that's a very unfortunate move to have to play. But because of the threat of bishop e7, it seems that move was forced. So, yeah, it seems that this endgame is lost now. You'll see that black can just keep constantly improving his position slowly. It was kind of impressive how he did it, actually. Let's see here. Yeah, he basically forced the progress all the way to here. And then eventually he plays, he very impressively is able to give up the f pawn to be able to get at the weak e4 pawn. So I think that Caruana played the endgame perfectly from here, so it's worthwhile to just see how he played it out. Bishop g4, bishop f2. He did waste some time, but the win was very convincing nonetheless. Bishop h5, king, bishop g6. So eventually he got the king over and then played f3 with the unstoppable king f4. King g1, king g4. Okay, a little bit of time wasting, but he played f3 eventually. And then he played f2, which was a great move. And now the endgame is completely lost. If you take with the king, then bishop check and take, and then all the pawns are lost. So, yeah, and when the bishop took, he simply played king f3. Bishop check and king to f4. And then this pawn was lost and the game was over. So, oh, that was a nice move, just to provoke the bishop to go to c4. And finally, white resigned.